Hey guys, welcome to the midweek. So we're
Hi,
so glad that
everybody.
you're joining us. Angela, I was doing an introduction there. You weren't, it was, you can wait
Well,
till I'm done.
hi, everybody.
Oh man. Well, so we are coming to you via Zoom this week because, as you all know, there's been crazy weather here in St. Louis, and our building in Chesterfield is shut down. And fortunately, over the last year, for just all kinds of reasons, we've learned to get a little bit better at this technology. And so we thought, well, we'll just do the midweek via Zoom this week, so we still get to be with you.
Right. And Tim, I know how much you hate to drive in the snow and ice.
Yeah, it's me.
We were forced to do it this way because Tim refused
It's me. It's
to
me.
get
I
in his really
refused
big
to
truck
drive into the building.
and drive to the building.
Actually, I do. So I've wanted a pickup truck for a lot of my life. I'll just say a lot of my life. And I ended up with one last year. And man, does it handle well in this ice and snow. So I would be at the building if it wasn't for you, Angela.
And I would not be, even if it weren't for you, Tim.
But
I would not.
but you are coming from the city, right? I mean, tell everybody where you live, because you live
Yeah.
quite a ways in.
Yeah. So we live near Tower Grove Park in a little neighborhood called Fox Park, right next to Compton Heights.
Yeah.
And so in the city, so for me to drive to Chesterfield, is a little bit of a
A little bit
haul.
of a haul.
I spend so much time at Grants Trail because that's a lot closer for me.
Yeah.
But the other fun fact that you may not know is I'm from Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
And in Mississippi, when you get an inch of snow,
That's it.
you don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You just don't go anywhere. So, so that's my motto in
There
life.
you go.
If it snows, I'm inside.
So you're inside to stay, and so thank God for Zoom. We get a chance to still do the midweek,
Yeah.
and it is interesting how, depending on what part of the country you're from, I have some friends who live in Minnesota right now, and nothing shuts down in Minnesota. In fact, I think they have what's called a wind chill. Like they'll cancel school when the wind chill gets below a certain temperature, but it's crazy. It's like -50 or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we all approach it differently, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yep. And I'm super grateful for a warm home.
Yeah. So speaking of, I didn't get a chance to be with you last week for the midweek, but it looks like you guys had a lot of fun. You had Rob co-host with you, and
You missed David Hawkins.
I know, and he's
And I
like
know
one of
you're
my
a little bit
favorite.
jealous about that.
I'm totally jealous. He's one of my favorite people, and he and I have gotten to do some videos together in the past and stuff. And so I was super bummed I didn't get a chance to be with David last week. But
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
looks
And it
like
was really
things went
great.
well.
Like you said, Rob joined us too.
Yep.
And so it was a lot of fun. But we missed you. We missed you. It wasn't at all the same.
Thank you.
But we warriored on.
There you go. There you go. I miss being with you guys too, but it looks like you had a lot of fun. And then David, of course, you had him on because he taught this last weekend, and it was just impactful and profound, as it always is. And we want to talk actually in a little bit about what a great service that was. But Angela, we didn't want to miss a chance to have this conversation today, even though the building's closed, because one of the things we really try to do with the midweek is stay connected with our church family, right? And keep talking about what God's doing in our midst and how he's preparing us for things. And these are important conversations we've been able to have on these Tuesday evenings.
Right. Yeah. And it's good just to even to see you. I mean, when
Yeah.
you're cooped up in your house for 2 days, it's actually good to see people.
Yeah, a little community goes a long way, right?
It actually does. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we get to do it anyway.
It's an important reminder that we're supposed to do this together.
Right.
And so we're actually getting ready to, I want to make sure I didn't forget anything. Was there anything we were supposed to talk about before we turn the corner?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We were going to talk about the season that's upon us.
Yep, because we're headed into one of those, especially if you grew up in a church that really practiced the church calendar.
Right.
Some do, some don't, but really important season in the life of the church calendar. Right.
The season of Lent. And I'll tell you what, even if you did grow up in the church, it's possible that it was just kind of a thing you did, or it had a lot of meaning. And so that's why I love to stop and talk about it, because over the years, it has come to have a lot of meaning for me.
Yeah.
When before, I think when I was younger, it was just, hey, what are you giving up for Lent? Hey, what are you giving up for Lent? And it was kind of, My kids would say, I'm giving up broccoli for Lent. I'm like, no,
No, you're going to eat your broccoli.
no, no.
That's great.
So I love to pause and talk about why we love Lent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I love that you're bringing up that distinction of so for the crossing, we don't follow the church calendar super closely, but we do try to call out when we enter into these important seasons, but we don't ever want it to be something where we just go through the motions. And so we're going to be doing some stuff together as a church. And actually, we're going to have a guest on Zoom who on the midweek who's going to kind of help us figure this out. And so now joining us on the midweek tonight is our very good friend, Pastor Joel Burke.
Hey, Joel.
Joel, there he is.
You would think I'd have the Zoom thing figured out by now, but
You've
I
had
always
a few months.
Well, it's still muted. So if I do that, I apologize.
I can hear you.
You sound great. It's good to be with you, Joel. Thanks for coming on the midweek.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I love hanging out with you guys. I'm always available.
There you go. Perfect.
Your daughters had been on the midweek before, so it was a toss up whether or not we had you or your daughters back.
I know. I mentioned, that you need to get my wife, Sarah, on here, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost because being out in front of people and like public like that, she doesn't like that very much, but yeah. I bet we could get her if we really try.
We could try. And in the meantime, we'll just say that that Sarah is the reason that Joel seems even remotely put together on these calls, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Call that out.
That's right. Absolutely.
Oh, man. Well, Joel, we were just talking about how depending on what church you grew up in, Lent can mean different things. Sometimes it's not something that a church will focus on. Sometimes they focus on, but they just kind of go through the motions. Sometimes it can be really meaningful. But for us, we want this season to be meaningful, and you're kind of helping us as a church get our minds around this season of Lent. And so, first of all, just today is Fat Tuesday, which isn't really a part of Lent, but it's a thing. So can we just start there? Tell us what Fat Tuesday is, and what is this season that we're headed into?
Absolutely. And first of all, you got to love the name, right? Fat Tuesday. I mean, it kind of just says it all. Like, this is the day that you get fat. I mean, if you want to hibernate, pack it on for the winter, like this is the day. That's kind of where your mind goes. But to be honest, there is a little bit of a church background to some of this. Now, they didn't always call it Fat Tuesday. And in fact, they would refer to it as Shrove Tuesday. And this is it kind of is connected to Lent in the fact that this is when we actually, if you grew up in tradition that on Ash Wednesday where you have the ashes and you do that on the forehead and everything, well, this is the day that they would burn the palm leaves from Palm Sunday last year. They would burn them on this day, and those would be the ashes that you use on Ash Wednesday.
Wow.
But it wasn't just that. They also really kind of focused today, Shrove Tuesday, on this idea of confession while seeking forgiveness for your sins. And so it was almost like preparing for Lent, if that makes sense. Now, we'll talk about Lent as well and the preparation that we're doing in that season. But it's, we have Lent that's preparing our hearts, but now we're preparing for Lent to prepare.
We're preparing to prepare.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's interesting because now, I mean, most people, when they think of Fat Tuesday, it's a Mardi Gras thing. And it's like, hey, we're going to have to fast here for 40 days. And so pig out, right? Like, let's make the most of celebrating before we start this time of penitence and that kind of thing. But you're actually saying it was originally a lot more of a spiritual kind of intentional practice. That's interesting.
It was. Yeah. And from the accounts that I've read, it would be this, and there was a little bit of that to it also. So they would actually eat like a big pancake breakfast on Shrove Tuesday because was kind of their let's get all the fatty foods in. So there was an idea, and I think that's how we got to where we are today with Marty. I mean, I don't know how a pancake breakfast turns into partying on the streets with floats and all of that stuff, but we got there somehow. But so when you trace it back, I mean, there's a little bit of that. Yeah, I mean, we are preparing for Lent.
Yeah. And so now Lent begins tomorrow with Ash Wednesday, and it will run through Easter. And tell us what the term even means. I mean, this isn't what you find in your pockets, right? This is there's
That's
more
right.
to it than that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Lent really, it's a time for us to prepare our hearts for the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. And that's it. You know, if you want to boil it down to just what is it? Well, that's what it is. It starts tomorrow, Ash Wednesday. I mean, if you're watching this on Fat Tuesday, Ash Wednesday is always after Fat Tuesday. So,
Yeah.
so tomorrow we start Ash Wednesday, and I got to tell you, like it for those of us who have grown up in traditions that celebrate Lent, it for me it has really helped um, prepare. I guess it helps me not miss Easter because in our busy society and we're going and going and going, like Easter always seems to like catch us off guard, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
man, like Easter's tomorrow. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, I completely missed all of this. And so one of the things that Ash Wednesday has really done for me is help me to not just focus on the sacrifice of Jesus, and that's a big part of Lent. We want to focus on that. Um, in fact, you'll the way some people do focus on that is by they themselves giving up or sacrificing things that seem important to them.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea behind giving something up for Lent. It's really supposed to be a small sacrifice, not just for sacrifice sake, but it's a small sacrifice so that then you can refocus your attention on the sacrifice that Jesus made for you.
Yeah.
And so the sacrifice is when you find yourself missing that thing that you gave up, it refocuses you and reminds you, right? I mean, that's the whole point of fasting and giving up. It's not to
Absolutely.
eat something, it's not to check off a box, it's not, it's not to show, gave up chocolate, it's to remember. It's all about
Yeah.
remembering.
Yeah. And I know, like when I was in high school, it's like, oh, I'm gonna give up something that didn't really matter to me, like something I don't do anyway. Like I'm gonna give up working out for Lent. Like, well, I don't work out any of the other time, so that's not a sacrifice. We're completely missing the point.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, Angela.
I was telling Tim, my son used to say he was going to give up broccoli for Lent.
Yeah, right.
Not a sacrifice.
Nice.
Not a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Somebody right now is watching this and going, I love broccoli. That would be an awful thing.
So in that case, it would work. That would be.
And it would work.
It might be. But the other thing that I started to really think about during Lent, and like I started thinking about this in high school and then also in college. Every time Lent season would come around, is that it can't just be about giving something up. And so I start putting the things together and connecting some of those dots. And it's the purpose of giving something up is so that we can, you said it, Angela, so that we can focus on that sacrifice, which means that there are other ways that we can do that as well. If that type of fasting from something is helpful, great. If it's not, then let's do something else. The whole point of this season is to intentionally focus your time and attention on what, like the biggest event in the history of the world, which is the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And so,
yeah. And so Joel, let me stop you there because I want you to turn the corner and tell us. So then we as a church are kind of heeding what you're saying right there and saying, so how do we do this together as a community? And by the way, those of you who are watching this right now, our moderator is going to put hopefully a link there in the comments on Facebook of a podcast that Joel and I did a while back now, but where we talked a little bit more about Lent and what Lent is and some of the theological background to it and different practices. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go give that a click and listen to that podcast. But Joel, tell us what we're doing this season as a church.
Yeah. And so instead of trying to challenge us with giving up something and sacrifice something, if you want to do that, that is great. But we as a church have really have been focusing on prayer. And it's not just during this season. If you've been paying attention, I mean, we've been intentionally incorporating other voices in prayer. We've had that on the weekend services. I absolutely have loved the past two prayer videos that we've incorporated into those services. I mean, they just really, they're powerful. So if you haven't watched that, plug for the weekend service, watch that. And then also be sure that you join us this weekend. But we've really been focusing on prayer. And I think that's the right move. If we really believe that God is the God of the universe, and we really believe that he loves us so much, that he cares about us and that he listens to us, that he actually did send his son so that we could be in a right relationship with him. If we believe all of that is true, then we also believe what the Bible says, that we get to go to him directly. And so when we pray, we are communicating with the God of all things. And I mean, that's just something that I'll never get over. I mean, when you think that you have that kind of access, that kind of relationship to somebody that is that big, that powerful, that cares that much about you. And so this season, we really do want to focus and be intentional. And I think that's a key word too. We want to be intentional with our time. And we want to make sure that some of that time that we are spending actually is with the God who loves us so much. And so prayer is the way that we're going to do that. The plan is to, on all of our social media platforms, we're going to post a prayer at the beginning of the week. And it's just going to be one prayer that we want you to pray every day throughout the week. Okay. Now, for some of you, it might seem like it's going to be a little repetitious, but can I tell you that when those words are on your lips every day, by the last day that you start praying is probably when that's going to start sinking in just a little bit. And so that's why we want to just give you some of those words to pray. Now, of course, pray on your own. Pray the prayers that God's laying on your heart as well. And I would emphasize that this doesn't need to be the only thing that you do this Lent. We just want to be able to provide something to help us as a community remember and be intentional with our time as we prepare our hearts for this, for Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection.
And to do it together. The fact that we all be praying the same prayer, to me, I just love that. And I also want to add to, if possible, pray it out loud. Because you said, Joel, how it'll start sinking into your own heart. Somehow saying those prayers out loud is just, and hearing yourself pray the prayers, it's just a powerful thing too.
It is powerful. And to that point, Angela, like, pray these with people that are in your house. I mean, if you're married, bring your spouse along with you, pray these prayers together. If you have kids, bring those kids with you. And can I just tell you, hearing prayers come off of the lips of little ones, God, I'm thinking about it right now and I'm about to cry. So we're going to have to be done here in a minute. But some of those things are just really, they remind me that God does actually care about me.
That's great. Yeah. So I love that our teams have come up with this idea and that we're going to get a chance to do this together at Lent. And one of the things that is so interesting to me about Lent is this idea that it's this kind of sorrowful season. We're giving things up. We're fasting in a way through Lent. It begins with Ash Wednesday, which is kind of a somber occasion. We know that this is kind of a long, slow march towards the crucifixion. Holy Week is always kind of full of conflict and kind of these really tense moments. And so it's kind of a difficult season in a way that we're walking through, but we know that ultimately what it is leading to is the resurrection.
Right.
And it's just, it's amazing to me to think about it that way, that we are going to go through a difficult season together with the anticipation of that event in history where all of our hope is found. Right. And
absolutely.
It's just this idea of what it looks like to trust that God is in control, that he knows what he's doing, and that even in the darkest moments that there is hope, there's a resurrection on the end of it. And our job in the midst of it is to wait on him, to anticipate what's happening, and to believe God, to believe what he's doing, which is really what David was kind of talking about this weekend when we were learning about Gideon. We got to the end of that message. And David Hawkins was just talking about, in the middle of circumstances, no matter how difficult, believe God, trust in him, believe what he's about to do. In fact, he said it in such a profound way. I want to just show a clip, if I may, just a quick reminder of how David kind of emphasized this weekend. And so this is from the message. Let me get my Zoom screen all ready to share and all of that. But let me show you guys this clip, and I'll remind you what David said this weekend. Take a look.
You need to know that even though you cannot see God, and sometimes you cannot feel God, you need to know that in the supernatural, God is working things out. I feel like running up and down these aisles. That God is making a way out of no way. That God is opening up doors that will blow your mind. I know. I want you to tell your neighbor something, but tell yourself, I believe God. Come on. I believe God. I believe God. It's dark. It's lonely. It's uncertain. But I believe it.
So energetic.
I know, you gotta love it when David Hawkins gets fired up.
Oh, that's so right.
But this idea of believing God, even though it's dark, even though it's uncertain, even though it's lonely, right?
Yeah.
God is on the move, and so we believe him, we trust him, and we rely on that resurrection power. That this story's
so
headed
perfect, leading us into Lent too.
Yeah.
So perfect, and so parallels so many of our lives, and maybe your life if you're watching, where you may be going through a dark time. And those words that David said, God will make a way where there is no way. He's going to open doors that are going to blow your mind. He's working things out that might be hard to believe, but we choose to believe it, right? Even when we don't see it and when we're anticipating what's coming. So this Lent season of anticipation just leads us right into that.
It does. And Angela, I got to tell you that when you share that truth in the context of Gideon, which is what David was teaching us on in this Heroes of the Faith series we're in, I don't know about you, but Gideon is somebody I relate to in Scripture. When for me, I'd love to hear what it was for you. For me, this idea of Gideon kind of looking at God and saying, the angel of the Lord, and saying, look, I know the stories of how you showed up in the past. Mm-hmm. I know how you delivered Israel from captivity in Egypt and part of the Red Sea. I know those stories, and I believe that you did it. What I'm struggling is, are you going to do it for me?
Right.
To deliver me? Are you going to help me? Is that resurrection power going to apply in my life? And Angela, that's where I just relate to Gideon, because I ask that question sometimes when you talk about being in a place where you feel inadequate, where you feel uncertain about the future, where you're wondering, what at the end of my days, what is my life going to amount to? You know, is there going to be a story for me where God showed up in a mighty way and used me and did something for the sake of his people and for the sake of this world? You know,
and one of the points that David made so powerfully is that God can handle those questions.
Right.
What are you good? Are you for me? Have I wasted my whole life on the wrong thing? I know you did it before. Why aren't you going to do it now? I mean, he can handle. He'd rather us be honest, in fact.
Yeah. Well, and the way he handles it, David talked about, is he handles it by saying, I'm with you.
Right. Yeah.
And so you just have to, like, day to day, you have to remind yourself, he's with, okay, I don't know how this is working out. He's with me.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
For me, what stands out in the story of Gideon is when, it says the Lord showed up, the angel showed up, and Gideon even says, he responds by saying, I'm the least of the least of the least of the least. But what the Lord says to him is he calls him a mighty warrior.
Yeah.
Straight off the bat, before he's done anything heroic, he calls him a mighty warrior. And what that reminds me of is that so many times the way we see ourselves, or the position we have in our culture or in our world or in our family or whatever it is not at all how God sees us, and not at all in conjunction with the plan that God has for us. So often, even to pause and say, can you show me how you see me, even in this situation where I feel powerless, where it feels dark, where I feel hopeless? How do you see me? And so often the words that God will speak will be more like mighty warrior than least of the least. He shows up and says, I have a plan that doesn't correlate with the way you see your place in your culture or your place in this world.
Right.
And all through the Bible, and David pointed this out this weekend, all through the Bible, he chose the most unlikely people.
Yeah.
And I mean, here you and I are, Tim.
Talk about unlikely.
Here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about the truth of God together. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and you see that when you talk about him choosing the most unlikely people. I mean, Paul talks about that, in his own way of kind of saying, how he was qualified in all the wrong ways, to be a part of what God's doing in the world. And I think we talked about this in the midweek a couple weeks ago, but she has been on my mind, is the biblical character Hagar. Sarah's servant, right? And she names God, you are the God who sees me.
Right.
And even in this really dark time where she's been basically kicked out of the house by Sarah, she's been completely dismissed and thrown to the side. God gives a promise to her. He says, your descendants are going to be as numerous. I can't remember what he says, if it's as the stars in the sky or too numerous to count, I think is what he says. Yeah. But it's almost just the same promise he made Abraham. To this servant woman.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
It also makes me think, Joel just mentioned his wife, Sarah.
Yeah.
How she would never come on and talk something like this. She'd certainly never stand up on a stage, and but she's a nurse.
She is.
And she's a hero, and she is going in and out, and maybe a multitude of people won't see what she does and how God's using her and how she comforts and how she serves. But she does. So it's not always on a massive platform. Now, the thing that pleases God is watching her love and serve people who are hurting day in and day out, and fearlessly in the face of a pandemic.
Yeah.
And so heroes have all different kind of looks, you know.
Do. And wherever, like for those of you who are watching the midweek with us right now, wherever you are, whatever it is you're doing, God sees you. I mean, God sees what you are doing, and he's calling you to do what he created you to do, for the sake of his kingdom, just like we were talking about with Sarah Burke. He's calling you to do it, and you get invited to be a hero in the faith in the same way. Yeah. So I think what we're going to do, Angela, if it's okay, I'm going to turn us towards home. We're going to actually kind of try something a little bit different just for this week, since we're coming to you on Zoom. We want you to continue the conversation in Facebook Live in the comments section. And so here's how this is going to work. We want to ask you a question. The question is this: where do you need to believe God these days? In the midst of what you're going on in what's going on in your life right now, where do you need to believe God? Or you might talk about how you've believed God in the past and he's shown up for you. And I would love for you guys to begin to share those in the comments section on Facebook Live. Our wonderful moderator, Irene, is going to be in there, and she's going to be kind of guiding the conversation. And there'll be some other folks in there to kind of help. But talk about this a little bit. Where do you need to believe God, or where have you believed him in the past and he's come through? Encourage one another, listen to one another, share stories with one another. What we're going to do is Angela and I will sign off, and we're just going to continue to fill this feed with some music that'll just kind of wash over you. If you want to use this time right now just to worship, to not pay attention to the comments, if you're watching this on YouTube Live, then you can just experience these moments, pray, speak to God about some of these things, maybe prepare your heart for the beginning of Lent, and take some time to do that. But if you're on Facebook Live and want to participate in the discussion in the comments, that's going to be the remainder of our midweek for this week. All right. Sound good?
Yep.
That's the plan.
God is with you.
Yes, he sure is. And so with that blessing in mind, Angela, good to see you. We'll be in person next week. So look forward to seeing you. But to the rest of you, God bless you. And we will see you around this weekend.
There's nothing that our God can't do. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's nothing that our God can't do. Yeah. Love, love, love. Just one word, you calm the storm that surrounds me. Just one word, you cause the darkness to retreat. Just one touch, I feel the presence of heaven. Whoa, just one touch, my eyes were open to see. My heart can't help but believe. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can do. Hey. Just one word, you heal what's broken inside me. Just one word, you revive every dream. Just one touch, I feel the power of heaven flowing over me. Just one touch, my eyes were open to see. My heart can't help but believe. Come on. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. We declare there's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a prison wall He can't break through. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Greater things, there's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Hey, I will believe, yeah, for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise.